Hello! I'm so excited to be back talking about books again. Of course, I wish I were talking to you all in person, but we'll have to just wait for that. I know it'll come back soon. My name is Jen, and I'm the teen librarian here at the Grandview Heights Public Library. You'll usually find me during normal times in the basement, which is our after school or our teens and tweens area. So it's for grades 4 through 12. We have a lot of after school kids that come by, and so after school this is usually where I'll be. So since you can't come in and talk to me about what kind of books I would recommend to you, I am here inside of your computer or your phone or tablet or whatever, talking to you about some of my favorites that I've been reading lately. So I'm gonna, we have, in the basement, we have books for grades 4 through 6 all along one wall. So one of my stacks will be from that section, and the other books will be from our grades 7 through 12 section. And there will be some fiction, nonfiction, graphic novel. There's a good mix. I've got 4 of each for you. So we'll do this every Thursday at 2 p.m. And we're actually going to have all different staff people recommending books. So you'll get a variety of perspectives and interesting recommendations. It's going to be really great. So I'm going to start off with our fiction for grades 4 through 6. The first one I have here is a classic. It was written, I believe, in the 60s. And it's called A Wizard of Earthsea. The series is just called Earthsea. It's written by Ursula K. Le Guin. So she is, she's sort of one of the best known science fiction novelists ever, really. She's really great. So she has some stuff for kids and for teens, and this is probably her most well-known. And it may not be as well known as things like Harry Potter is these days to kids, but it's still really, really worth going and seeing, because if stuff sticks around for this long, you know, it means it's good. It's got staying power. So this series is set in a fictional land, and it stars, the first book stars Ged, and some of the other books later do too, but not all of them. And Ged is a young boy he's learned some magic tricks here and there, some charms and things, which is pretty typical for the part of the world that he lives in. But he is taken under the wing of an experienced wizard and he becomes an apprentice and then later becomes a wizard. This is his journey. It's a really tough journey. He's pretty, he thinks a lot of himself. He thinks very highly of himself, and that gets him into trouble. And he has lots of learning to do along the way. That's just what I'll say about that. So I recommend this, and if you like it, the second book is actually my favorite in the series. It's really good. We will move on to our other fiction book for grades 4 through 6. So some of you may have already heard of this author or read Refugee. Refugee was published a year or two ago and won a lot of awards. He's a pretty popular historical fiction author. I believe Grace talked about Refugee in one of the earlier virtual book talks too, so you may have heard about him there. But this one is set in World War II, and it's actually set in Japan. You know, a lot of World War II novels are set in Germany or just in Europe in general. But of course, you know, important parts of the war were with the Japanese army. So this is set in Okinawa, which I knew was an island, you know, that was part of the country of Japan. But in this book, Okinawa used to be its own sort of territory or area or country, and it was taken over by the Japanese shortly, like right before this book takes place. So the people of Okinawa are really different culturally than the people of Japan. They're a really sort of peaceful people. They're sort of typical, when you think of like islanders, they're typical islanders. And they have, the Japanese army has actually drafted kids, like teenagers, into, you know, learning how to fight and to be soldiers. And so this, it alternates between Hideki, who is the Japanese boy who I believe 14 or 16, and then Ray. Ray, I think, has just turned 18, and he's an American soldier who has been shipped to Japan. And so the book alternates back and forth, and it really is. It does not sugarcoat war. It's really this can be a tough book to read at some points. It's very good though. It talks a lot about sort of the realities of war and misconceptions we may have about the people on the other side, and how maybe we don't actually know the whole story, things like that. He does a really good job of depicting both Hideki and Ray as being just really kind of whole human beings, and I appreciated that about this. The next book that I'm going to talk about is actually a memoir, a graphic memoir. I talk a lot about graphic memoirs. I like graphic novels too. Graphic memoirs, though, I think are a really great way to have some nonfiction, to get some nonfiction in I don't know, in just a different way, and also kind of a faster way. And then of course there's some visual art thrown in there too. So this is about Bruce Lee, the boy who became a dragon, and it's just by Jim DeBartolo. And this one, I picked it up because I thought, okay, I don't really know a whole lot about Bruce Lee. I know he kind of died young, and I know his son also did, and that's kind of it. I know he was an actor. So I picked this up to learn a little more, and I didn't expect a whole lot out of it because, I don't know, I just wasn't. But I actually really liked it, and this was a really fascinating book. Bruce Lee is a really interesting person who did a lot of really interesting things in his life. He was not very healthy when he was born, and yet he became this really strong and accomplished martial artist. And of course he was also an actor. And his death was really surprising. The whole thing was surprising. I keep thinking about, my mind keeps coming back to this book and all of the different things I learned about him. Novels are wonderful. I love novels, but when you read about a person who actually really did these interesting things and it wasn't made up, I don't know. I think there's something really fascinating about that. So I really, really highly recommend The Boy Who Became a Dragon, about Bruce Lee. My other graphic book is also nonfiction. It is, so Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales. Nathan Hale is a graphic artist, and he has a whole series of American history books written in graphic format. So they're all nonfiction, but they're written like a graphic novel. And this one is actually about Harriet Tubman. And I know that I read and learned about Harriet Tubman when I was in school, when I was in probably elementary school mostly, but I was just totally captivated by this book. I was so surprised at all of the different things that I learned about, like her visions and how it was a little bit like Joan of Arc in the way that she would have these visions that were due to a head injury, actually. But she felt like she maybe was speaking to God. She had this sort of intuition about what she should do, and that led her to this success in helping free so many enslaved people. So I liked this. The nice thing too about this series is that war. A lot of American history talks about war and other things that are pretty intense. There's actually a rating on this book that the author has done. So he calls it his hazard level, and he tells you a little bit about what kind of, I guess, intense or scary things are in this novel, or this book rather. So that I thought was kind of nice. This one is rated as grave compared to the other ones. So and he tells you all it's just kind of like a movie rating. So I appreciated that. I thought that was cool because some things might be okay for some kids, but maybe not everything in the series would be good. So that's everything I have for grades 4 through 6. We'll go ahead and move on to grades 7 through 12 now. And I know you have seen me talk about this author, Jason Reynolds. He's really great. He's the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature for the Library of Congress. He has written a lot of really good stuff, both for teens, for this grade, or this grade range, but also for slightly younger kids, like the track series. I talked about the track series, and I think Lloyd, another staff person, also talked about one of the track series. He's just really great. Honestly, I would say just read anything he writes. But this one is called When I Was the Greatest. It's one of his older books, and it's set in Brooklyn, and it's 3 boys who live in a pretty rough area. Ali is nicknamed after Muhammad Ali because he likes to box. He's the main character, and he lives next door to 2 twins, Needles and Noodles. Those are their nicknames. Needles because he has Tourette's, and one way to sort of calm himself and control his outbursts is by knitting. Ali's mom taught Needles how to knit, and then Noodles, part of the book, he was I guess kissing a girl, and his Ali's sister said that he looked like a noodle for some reason. So those are their nicknames. And anyway, they live in Brooklyn. They are, I think, 15 or 16, and they they're pretty typical 15-year-old boys, but they do happen to get themselves into trouble, kind of stemming from an outburst that Needles had that the people around him didn't understand, and they didn't know him to know that he had Tourette's, and so it gets him into a lot of trouble, and he has to figure out his way out, but he also doesn't have to figure it out on his own. He has a lot of support, and that's really great. It's not it's not a doom and gloom kind of book, even though it looks pretty grim from the cover. That's a gun with a crocheted cozy around it, if you will. So yeah, I definitely recommend this book. I liked it, and then I liked the whole thing, and then at the ending was really, really good. All right, moving on to my other novel for books for grades 7 through 12. This is actually one of my all-time favorite authors. Her name is Maggie Stiefvater. She writes pretty weird stuff, but pretty good stuff. She wrote the Raven Cycle, which it's probably her most well-known series. It starts with the Raven Boys, and it's so good, so good. This book was actually a Prince Honor book. It's called The Scorpio Races. It's set in a fictitious island of Thisbe, which seems like it's probably maybe in the United Kingdom, something like that, somewhere in that area of the world. And there's a girl, Puck, who she and her brothers were orphaned. They're all teenagers. And then there's Sean, who was his dad died and his mother left the island. Thisbe's a really rough island to live on, and a lot of people just feel like they can't do it, so they leave. But the real story behind this is that there are these horses on the island, or they're actually in the ocean, is where they come from, and they're these sort of murderous, mythical, magical. They're not mythical. They're magical horses that every year, every October, they come out of the sea and they're captured and they're trained for a year, and then they race them. And there's a big prize, and Puck, she's an orphan along with her brothers. They need to find money to save the family home, and so she decides to enter this, but she decides to enter it on her regular horse, which is everyone thinks is completely crazy. They don't even know if it's allowed. Everyone is getting mad. No girl has ever ridden in the races, or woman has ever ridden in the races. So it's just this, this I don't know. People are pretty upset about the whole thing. And then Sean is the male main character. They go back and forth between Puck and Sean. And he's a really good rider and a really good trainer. And he has his reasons for needing and wanting to win the Scorpio races this year too. So this is about what happens there with this year's races. Great book. She has a lot of great stuff. The next book I'm gonna recommend. You may have already heard about it or seen it, but if you haven't read it yet, this is a graphic novel or a comic book series really called Lumberjanes, and this is the first volume called Beware the Kitten Holy, and the artists, they kind of rotate through this series. So like who's listed here, I think there are 16 books out now, and who's listed here, they're not the same people who write on 16, which is kind of typical for comic books. This Noelle Stevenson, she's one of the creators of this series, and she's also the person who created the reboot of She-Ra on Netflix. And I think you may have heard me book talk Nimona, another graphic novel of hers. But anyway, she and a few other people got together to make Lumberjanes. It's set at a summer camp, which has the greatest name ever. It's Miss Quinzella Thisquin Peniquical Thistle Crumpets Camp for Hardcore Lady Types. So that right there, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to read this and see what it's like. Yeah, it's a summer camp. The characters, they go out and they kind of sneak out of their cabin a lot, and they kind of run into some supernatural trouble that they have to figure out, fight their way through, rescue themselves, etc. from. And yeah, it's really good. It's really funny. It's really silly. And it's in the teen section. However, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and I'm pretty careful about what I let her read in terms of maturity above her level. And I do this is like one of the only things in the teen section that I'm comfortable with her reading, because we have it in the teen section because it's geared towards teens, but really anybody I would say anybody who's 10 or 11 can easily read this. It's not too mature or anything. So yeah, Lumberjanes, it's a nice big long series, and they just keep having lots and lots of adventures at this really interesting named summer camp. So that's a good one to check out. And my last one is a graphic format as well, and it's kind of a graphic memoir, but it's also, so it's nonfiction, but it's also, it's the author, so he lived through the California wildfires in 2017, and he started a comic, I guess you could call it, that he had published in the local paper in California where he lived, and it was very, very popular, and so he turned it into a book. And in this book, though, there are, I think, 5 other very short memoirs of other people who were affected by the wildfires. And I don't know, maybe it's because I have a real curiosity about natural disasters, or maybe it's just because, living in Ohio, we don't, we of course, we always hear about the wildfires as they happen, but we don't really ever, I don't think we really have any clue about the reality of it. And it's just, I don't know, there was a lot in here that was pretty mind-blowing. I just think until you've lived through something like this, you just really have no clue. So I thought this was really interesting to read. Yeah, so nonfiction by Brian Fies called A Fire Story. So that's my last book for today. I hope that you find something good in there to read. And you can always also email us through our website, or give us a call during our open hours, and we're happy to put together books for you if you just, call in and say, hey, I'm looking for, I'm in 7th grade and I really like fantasy, and, these are the books I've liked recently, and we can put together a stack of 5 or 6, and you can check them out with our curbside service and, read which ones you like and return the ones you don't. So we want to help you find some good stuff to read. So yeah, give us a call or an email if you think you would like some help. But hopefully you find these videos useful. And we will see you next week with a brand new staff member to talk about their recommendations. All right, Happy New Year.